Hey, my name is Gavin. I'm standing behind the screen. I'm going to be talking about Git Rebase in terms of comic book continuity. I work for an agency called Radify. If you don't know who we are, pick up a copy of PHP Architect this month as an interview with our founder. What I wanted to talk about is there are many Git workflows, but this is part of ours, okay? So what I don't want us to do is start a holy war on the right and wrong way to use Git. I don't want to start a holy war on whether you should use merge or rebase. This talk is more aimed at explaining Git Rebase to people who have maybe struggled with it. And this is like the main use case of Git Rebase that I'm going to be talking through today. So let's imagine that we've got a comic book, and these are the terms that I'm going to explain it in. And I got our artist, well, our graphic designer Andrew, to draw some comic book panels to help illustrate this. But let's say this guy Alex has drawn a comic book, right? And you've got these three frames. There's an ordinary high school student. He's getting bullied. He runs into the lab to escape, and he knocks over some chemicals. The chemicals mix. Ralph inhales, and his skin turns to living stone. He vows to fight crime as Rock Savage, which is literally the worst name we could come up with. So this is, imagine this is like your commit history. So these are the things that have happened in the history of your product. These are considered canonical. This word canon in comic books, it means what is generally accepted to have happened in the past. So you get the early Batman stories. Batman carried a gun and was actually killing people. That has been retconned out of the continuity that Batman never kills anyone. So that's retcon is short for retrospective continuity. So you're basically saying, oh, it was always this way. And that's sort of similar, but not quite the same to what Rebase does. So we're going to go through a few examples, and hopefully it'll click with those of you who haven't understood Rebase before. It's not as scary as you might think. And those of you who get it already, you can pick holes in it later, because as Joel Spolsky says, every metaphor is leaky, every abstraction is leaky. There are no perfect metaphors. This is just a way of getting your head around it that's worked quite well for me when I've been coaching juniors. So that's A1, Alex's story, right? And that's what we're pointing master at. In Git, master, all it is a label. It's nothing magic. It's just a label you attach to a point in history, and you say, right, this is master, this is where we're at. This is, where development happens. Your master is just a convention. It could be called trunk. Subversion, you have trunk, or it could be called mainline or production or whatever. Master is your most common. And we're calling this story that we've just looked at, this amazing, beautiful, detailed, and not in any way ridiculous or cheesy story, A1. Now let's say we've got two artists, Alex and Bryce. I deliberately chose gender-neutral names and then screwed up by calling Alex he straight away, but they're gender-neutral characters. So we've got Alex and Bryce. They've both got a branch, if you like, or they've both got a storyline that is following on from the canon. So master. So they're both following on from the canon. So Bryce starts writing Bryce's story. An evil scientist is building a laser beam, which is what they do and why there shouldn't be any science. Rock is smashing through the wall and captures the evil scientist. That's Rock's version of events, right? I mean, as far as we know, the scientist was working on a cure for herpes. Alex's second story, so Alex is A2, so Alex's second story is in parallel to Bryce's first. Rock Savage spies a mugging in process. Person on the floor is doing the right thing by getting the arm across the leg, but does look like he's going to get a shoeing. So he takes action. Andrew tried to impress me by drawing a decent rear naked choke, but I would argue that the fingers aren't over the biceps, so I'm not allowing that. Rock Savage captures the mugger. So this is Alex's story. So we have Alex and Bryce have both done stories. I'm actually going to walk in front of here because I like the sound of my own voice. So the continuity forks this way. They're in parallel. This is kind of like you've got a branch in Git. So you've got the mainline development in master, and at that point you've cut a branch. Your colleagues cut a branch. Alex and Bryce, A and B, they both have their own branch. Alex and Bryce can do their work in their respective branches, and it doesn't affect what each other's doing. They're completely insulated from any changes to the canon that the other person might make. So they're insulated from any change to the API or the functionality of the code that the person might make. But they are respecting what is known as the master continuity. They're respecting canon because they are based off master. Emphasis deliberate. So there's my sort of Git diagram. which at gunpoint, Andrew's got me to draw in OmniGraffle and not Google Drive like I usually do because those diagrams looked horrible. Apparently, I can't see the difference. But then again, I'm an engineer. So what happens is that the publishers say, hey, we really like Bryce's work. Bryce sends off the comic to the publishers. This is like raising a pull request. At Radify, we use a pull request workflow. As I said before, there's no magic, golden, silver, hammer, bullet solution. Right? Pick and choose any one of those metaphors you like. There's no magic solution. Only because I use them interchangeably, and I end up saying things like magic hammer, and someone said, "Don't you mean golden hammer?" Or I'll say golden bullet, don't you mean silver bullet? So I use them interchangeably. So there's no magic solution. But we use a pull request workflow, and this works really, really well for us. And I have other blog posts and talks that I do about why we use this workflow, how it ties in with immutable infrastructure, how it ties in with deployment to clients. But that's a whole other story. Check out Radify.io/blog for more posts from me, which are a little bit probably more technical. So that's now the mainline continuity because the pull request has been merged, if you like. They've said, yes, we're going to publish this. However, this is still based off that. This comic strip is not taking into account anything that happened in there. So you've still got an extant branch, if you like. So what's happened is B1, Bryce's branch, Bryce's comic book, has been grafted on to the mainline continuity. And Alex's second one is off to the side somewhere. It's sort of still based on that. A master, which is just a pointer, all it is a label, is still pointing, is now pointing at Bryce's first comic book. So we have a straight continuity, and then we have something off to the side. Thankfully, that all fits together nicely. So when Alex sends Alex's second story in, they put it all together, and it reads fine. There are no conflicts there. That's your normal case when you raise a pull request. Normally, there aren't any conflicts. Certainly, no code I ever write ever conflicts with anything. It's set for logic and reason. So, at this point, the comic's selling like wildfire, as I'm sure you can all imagine from the sparkling quality of my writing. Master is still on A2, and they get Alex and Bryce to write another story. So they're like, come on, guys, we need to start cranking these out. So Alex's third story, Rock Savage is saving a school bus from a werewolf, because that's like what werewolves do. I've literally wrote these in 2 minutes. He draws back his hand to strike, and he decides, no, Rock Savage does not kill. He defines the character he is going to be at this point. So obviously this, in terms of canon, is a very significant event. This is like defining an API. If you define, or a database table or something like that. Yeah, this isn't the time for a NoSQL rant, is it? But Rock Savage doesn't kill. So Rock Savage has made a decision at this point. So with Bryce's second story, again, based off A2, which is our canon, our master branch, Rock Savage interrupts the kidnapping of the mayor's daughter. The kidnapper shoots Rock Savage, but the bullets bounce off. Rock Savage kills the kidnapper with an extremely dramatic spurt of blood. I left it up to Andrew as to how these things would play out. I think it was a different event that triggered it in my original script as well, but I like the way he's got the gun pointing off the side. But anyway, so you can see that these two things are effectively in conflict. These two things can't coexist in the character and in the canon. Well, they could, but they could. It could be that he makes that decision after that. But let's just say that we've got a conflict here. We cannot merge A3 and B2 to our master branch. We can't move that pointer. Okay? I'm not going to get into how Git works, but in terms of directing acyclic graph and all that kind of stuff. But if you do want to know a bit more about how Git works, feel free to grab me afterwards. But okay, so we've got these two things, which is, I think my fade was meant to be about 30 seconds ago. Let's just pretend I did that. These two things in conflict. So they decide to go with Alex's version of events, Alex's version of the character. They decide to do that because they're like, okay, well, let's just say that we want a more peaceful character. Characters like the Punisher don't sell as well as characters like Batman because they're going around doing murders and everything. So Alex gets merged onto Master. Bryce is now in a merge conflict state, a potential conflict state. If you're on GitHub, you will see this branch is in conflict, cannot merge. Other tools are available, Bitbucket, Gitorious, whatever. GitLab, is that one? That's the problem commit. So what happens, I don't know if you notice that arrow change, watch B2. What happens is Bryce says, okay, I'm going to rebase off master. I'm going to base my work on the new version of master that incorporates Alex's commits. And Bryce could have rebased at this point here, but that was not yet canon. So why would you do that? Sometimes there's a case of doing that, but generally you want to rebase off what is now canon. Because the version of Rock Savage as a character that does not kill is now canon, this is why Bryce says, hey, I'm going to rebase off that. I'm going to base the history of the character on the current canon, rather than the version of the canon as it was when I started my story, when it was not established that the character didn't kill anybody. So here's the rebased version. That's the only panel that's changed is the final one, which is another chokehold. I don't know. That's not too bad. I guess you could work that. So Rock Savage captures the kidnapper. And then Bryce sends off Bryce's updated copy back to the publisher, i.e. updates the pull request, does a force push or whatever. I have no objection to people doing force pushes on their own branches, just never force push to master. If you're using GitHub, always turn on force push protection on your master branches or any shared branches. I always say that sharing a branch is like sharing a toothbrush. It's pretty unhygienic and dirty. Actually, if you speak to me one-on-one, I use a much more filthy metaphor than that, but there we go. So there's the continuity, and it all tallies, it all works nicely, there are no conflicts. If you look at the history of comic books, it's far more snarled than this, because some of them have continuities that have gone for 80 plus years or whatever it is. Yeah, 70 years at least. But in our case, it's fairly simple, and we don't have any conflicting character traits. So I'm going to define a few bits and pieces of terminology that I use. So repository, I'm looking at as like a comic book series. So when I start a repo, I'm starting a series of publishings, and each commit is almost like a frame of a comic book. A commit, yeah, it could be an issue or a frame of the comic book. And that is like, the way Git works is it's a graph, and you put new nodes into the graph, right, going through time. When I'm sending the draft to a publisher, it's like raising a pull request. It's like saying, I want this to become part of the continuity. I want this to become canon, i.e. the master branch. That's your kind of canon continuity. Any draft that's being worked on, a feature branch. Feature branches, we use them at Radify for everything. Every single ticket has a feature branch. Everything's a story. We have a feature branch for everything. The way that we work on it is we cut a branch, we work in it, we push it, and we raise a pull request. Jenkins goes, hey, there's a new pull request, stands up a demo node that's a self-contained version of whatever client system. And it's all based on immutable infrastructure in AWS. That's a whole other series of talks that I do. But that's basically a self-contained demo node that the client can test. And we can continue updating that until we're happy with it. It remains a draft until it gets pushed into master. Sometimes we use integration branches as well, which kind of sit between, which is like multiple people are making feature branches off integration branches. And sometimes we might use a Git flow workflow, but generally feature branch workflow for a small team like ours is perfect. A rebase is when we update continuity, so I'm working away in my feature branch, my colleague Warren or Nate or John or Simon or whoever, they put something into master, one of their pull requests gets merged, and then GitHub is saying, hey, you can't merge this now, there's conflicts. Generally I rebase as I go. Anytime I'm working on something, I pull down the latest master and I rebase to make sure that what I'm doing is compatible with the continuity of the product as everybody understands it. Okay, so that I'm not completely off the reservation. It's very important if you've got a long-running branch, i.e. if you're working on loads and loads and loads and loads of panels of a comic book, that you constantly check what's coming out. You constantly check what's going on in the canon continuity, because otherwise you might be writing a load of crazy stuff, but when you go to submit it to the publisher, you're going to have to redo it all. So that is why I continuously rebase and make sure my continuity is in harmony with the canon continuity. What I don't do is rebase master. the reason I don't do that because that literally is rewriting shared history. It's not just my own history, my own neatness. It's shared history. And there are other uses of Rebase as well, such as squashing commits and things which I do as well. I like to make sure one commit represents one atomic change to the system. And I have a series of talks about intentional and unintentional change and how squashing commits can help me with that. But again, I would never do that in master. That's always only in my own branches, because I can make as much mess as I want, and I can clean it up, give it to my publisher, submit a pull request. Conflict resolution, that's when I'm changing my draft based upon new information received. When the master continuity is updated, a new character's been added that I haven't included, or a character's died that I've written a storyline based on, I need to bring that into my branch, and the earlier I do that, the better. Updating a pull request, it's like if I do a push to my pull request branch, or I do a force push, whatever it is, I can say, hey publisher, this is a new thing, and my publisher in my case is GitHub, Jenkins, Amazon Web Services, and the whole battery of unit integration and functional tests that run on every commit I make. And then merging a pull request is the product, the sort of technical product owner saying, yes, I will merge this pull request. It's like publishing an issue of a comic. It's like saying, this feature branch, this pull request, this integration branch, whatever it is, this is coming into the product. You can probably start picking this apart in your head of where these metaphors don't quite work, but I'm looking for broad strokes here. I'm not looking to fully explain every aspect of Git, and I'm aware that I've sort of fudged a few details for the sake of clarity, but my hope is that if someone's sort of a bit new to Git, a bit new to branching, a bit new to the idea of Rebase, is put off by Rebase, has been cornered in a pub by someone who shouted at them that Rebase is always evil, which you may well do to me later. I don't mind heckling. I should have said that at the start and been brave. But that's essentially who I'm looking to get to, because this is the way that we do things. It's been very, very successful for us. We don't have any real problems with our Git history. It's all nice and clean. We can see what happened, when and why, and there's not a lot of cruft in there. So it's been very advantageous for us. So as I said, all abstractions are leaky. Joel Spolsky nailed it. This is our blog. This talk is in slightly more coherent and less poster-pine format at Git comic book continuity and Git Rebase, radify.io/blog. We've got all sorts of content there about infrastructure, AngularJS, PHP, workflow, etc. And as I say, Nate Abele, our founder, one of the guys who wrote the original Cake PHP and the Li3 framework and UI router and all that kind of stuff, he's in PHP Architect this month. He talks a bit about who we are. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm, as everyone in this industry is, chronically shy, but I am approachable. Here's all this garbage that you can contact me with. And that is all I have to say. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Kat.
So I was wondering what's the difference between rebasing from master and just doing a git pull? The same.
Okay, so what I can do is I can pull in from master, right? I can git check out master and git pull to get the latest master. I would then git check out my feature branch, then git rebase master. And another way I could do it is I could git merge master, so I could merge master into my branch. But I only merge the other way. That's the way I do things. I mean, that becomes quite a technical thing there. What I'm looking for in the talk is kind of the theory of it. But yeah, that's the way that I do things. Is the rebase is saying I want the history of what I'm doing to be based upon this version of events, whereas merge says I want to pull this thing into here. Does that make sense? Yeah, wicked. Thank you. Thank God, because I was at the very limits of my Git knowledge there. Yes, sir.
Do you find when you're working in a feature branch, you sometimes start changing things that aren't based on that feature?
Yes.
Then what do you do about it?
Okay, so what the crux of what you're saying here is atomicity. It's that when you submit a pull request, it should be one thing and one thing only. The beauty of branches is you can have an infinite number of them. So what I will generally do is I will carry on with my feature, but I might cut another branch. And I even sometimes have two workspaces for some of our bigger clients, because this happens to me a lot. As you can probably tell by the way I speak, I get distracted by shiny things. And, I go off on tangents and stuff. That's the way that my mind works. And I'm even on a tangent about my mind works now. But yeah, that's what I'll do is I'll work on it in parallel and I'll submit a separate pull request, because it's like an atomic thing. pull requests are cheap. You can make as many as you like. And the reason we do everything from pull requests is because that means somebody other than me has approved my code before it becomes canon. There's this concept of canon, this concept of that it's the agreed upon history of the project, that somebody else has said, yeah, what Gav's done here is not completely bonkers. So that's why we use pull requests. And as branches are free, pull requests are free, should raise as many as we can. So yes, if I see something fundamental in the product, I'll go, yeah, that's sort of another story. Or I might put it on the backlog and we'll prioritize it later. But me being me, I'll usually jump on it straight away while the iron's hot, right? But yeah, what you should do is put it on your backlog, I think.
So does that mean your master branch is just one long line of commits and that everyone's got one pair?
Yeah, our master branch looks beautiful, but everything that's gone into it is chaos. But it's not really chaos because it's understood by the person who's done it, and it's changing and it's morphing and it's changing shape, and then you submit it when it's ready. And at the point at which it goes into master for us, it's already been through all our automated tests. We go for 100% code coverage, or as close as possible we can get. End-to-end tests. We have demo branches that the client and the product owner can test it on. We have representative infrastructure. It's all immutable infrastructure, so there's no server drift, nothing. So we know that it's been tested in representative environments. And at that point, it's ready to go into master. And at that point, we squash it or we shape it. And some people are averse to squash. What squash does is it turns like 3 commits into 1, or n commits into 1, or n commits into less than n, basically. And I would do that if I've got commit and then one that just says, oh, that wasn't quite right, oh, that still wasn't quite right, oh, that, and then I'll squash those. But each single commit should just be making one atomic change. And my golden rule is that the system before and after the commit should not be in a broken state. So there shouldn't be 3 commits and in the middle of it it's broken. That's no good to anyone. You get me? So another good reason for that is that if anyone's used a tool called Git Bisect, what that does is it does a binary chop. So you're like, this version of the system is broken. This version of the system's working. Right, let's take that one. So the problem exists between here and here. Take that one, to that one, to that one, until you found the commit that causes the problem. If you've got a broken repository at any point, if you've got like PHP errors or whatever and your code doesn't compile, then that's going to fool Git Bisect, because you can feed Git Bisect into a unit test. So you might get false positives. So having a clean history is really, really useful for bisecting, because when you approach a bug, I mean, this is a whole other talk, but there are various angles you can look at it. You can look at it through like one dimension, which is, okay, where are my unit tests failing? Another, let's go and look at the metrics, let's go and look at the logs, let's go and look at what's happening on the box. Another, which is, let's ask our customers what's going on. Another way you can go fixing a bug is, let's go historical. Let's see if this was happening yesterday, especially if you've got a functional system and a database like Datomic, but let's not get too off into the weeds. But yes, so very, very long-winded way of saying there's a real strength in having an ordered and clean history where the system is in an intact state at every commit, and the branches can be as nuts as you like until you're ready to merge them.
Follow-up, not necessarily Git-based related question.
Yeah.
Does that mean what you're treating as master is essentially live all the time? Because
Kind of.
if you ever have bugs, because the reason we sometimes merge it off is probably because we're not doing it right, we're not doing it as well, is because somebody's we find a bug on a live system, which we then...
We tend to have a branch prod as well, which is usually in track with master, but occasionally we'll rush patches into there. And we're getting away from that. We're getting towards having multiple integration clusters. And if I show you, I mean, even my own team hasn't seen this yet. But I'm just going to show you real quick how I actually go about this stuff. Sing a little song while I'm working. I can't really sing, but I can give you the... There we go. Okay, so this is sort of a doc that I'm working on based on leveling up our immutable infrastructure stuff. And what we're going to get to is that we have a VPC for staging already, and then we have an integration cluster for each client, and we can put any one of those in production at any time because they create an AMI, and we have auto-scaling clusters, and we can just say, hey, Amazon, use this AMI now, and all of a sudden they've got that AMI. And it's a little more complicated than that, but basically what it means is that we can have multiple branches that we treat as master, but we still have a master branch which is kind of canonical, but these ones, we can't let them drift too far from master. But when we have that situation whereby we might have a big feature's gone into master and we don't quite want it to go out yet, and we have a bug, we might stand up one of these integration clusters and test the features like that. The other way you can go with that is feature flags, which is probably the way I would be more inclined to go, which is I would put a little bit of code in that says, yeah, turn this feature on and off. That's quite a good way because you can give the client control panel to turn on and off bits of features. And the other way that I'm going now is Canary Releases, which is release is kind of similar to that infrastructure approach there, but actually pushing out multiple versions of the system concurrently within the same cluster. And then what happens is when it hits the application layer, it sets a cookie, and then my load balancer, HA proxy or whatever, can go, oh, they've got this cookie, I'm going to give them this version of the code. That's how Facebook do things, so they can roll out features, say you're working in a school and you just roll it out to the teachers and then just to the caretaker and then just to the headmaster, and you can gradually roll it out using your infrastructure. And that's using separate versions of the code, so that's using branches. So there's all sorts of different ways that you can approach that. So I've just blasted 3 different ways of solving the same problem at you, but unfortunately that's how my mind works. I'm a sort of a problem generation machine. Does anyone else have any questions?
What's the easiest way to screw up rebasing your code?
Rebase further than where your branch started. So if I'm Bryce, right, and I'm doing this rebase here, if I, instead of rebasing here, I rebase back there, and I get sort of my commit somehow snarled up in the history there. So what I do is you can do git rebase head dot master or something like that, or master dot head. I can't remember the exact syntax at the top of my head because I'm a bit weird and I actually count the commits, so I'm a bit anal about it. But you can say git rebase this far. Sorry, I'm talking more about squash rebase now rather than rebasing off a branch. But yeah, in squashing, that's probably the most dangerous area. If you squash back too far, you can snarl your history up. And failing to rebase as you go is probably the worst one, because when you rebase, you get conflicts and you have to rewrite bits of your software. And sometimes what you'll do is you'll get a bit of column A, a bit of column B, and you'll mung them together, and you've got neither one nor the other. And you've got to be really careful about reviewing that, which is why we have this pull request work through as well, because it's saying, like, one of my colleagues is casting his eye over my code as well as all the automated tests and everything. They can't catch everything. So Warren or whoever will go, okay, I can see that Gav screwed up a rebase here, which has been known. That's the main thing when John, I don't think he would mind me saying, he was actually the inspiration to write this. He's one of the guys that we took on recently. And he's a really smart guy, but it took him a while before he kind of got on board with this kind of workflow. And there were a few times where he was doing fairly complex rebases on fairly large systems, and it can be tricky. And at that point, sometimes it's better to restart your branch. Just have a separate workspace, restart your branch, keep the other one as a reference copy. These branches are free. So yeah, there's no real clear answers to all this stuff. Refer again to my many Git work.
Presumably that's the way you want the way of testing what's going to happen as well, if you're not sure.
Yeah, definitely. You can always recover in Git. That's what I like about it. Unless you start blowing away your .git directory, and then you've got bigger problems. But even like I've dived into Git reflog before and saved the day, and you do feel like a superhero, but you don't want to have to do that. Anybody else? Or are we getting sick of the sound of my voice? Because I'm not. I'll talk all night. Okay. Was that a question or was that hairbrush?
No, just to add to the question about what to do. So maybe just like share a tip if somebody doesn't know. So usually what I do, because it's sometimes you're working on something and then something comes in and you just jump straight away to fix it and you realize you're on the wrong branch. So and sometimes you can't easily just switch to another branch because then you'll get all your changes moved in there rather than just what you want. So
that's right, yeah.
Git stash, and I don't know if it's part of Git or some applications like source tree, which just actually allows you to like commit a chunk. So in the same file, you can just commit different chunks to different branches or stash.
P, I think it is.
Yeah.
You can select. Yeah, those are 2 really good tips there. So the first one is Git stash, which is just like puts it in a stack, and then you can do the Git stash pop. And the other one was that you can commit just selective chunks of your file. So that works really well. Another thing that I use is if I commit to the wrong branch, I'll go to the other branch and I'll Git cherry pick and that allows me to take just individual commits. And that's somehow how we sometimes how we update production without affecting master. Occasionally, if we really want to fast track something through, let's say that I don't know, some crazy things happened, like I don't know, someone's been drunk and fallen asleep on the keyboard. Never happened in our organisation, of course, but imagine there's just like a load of garbage on the website and you needed to get it off immediately. Git cherry pick something into production. I mean, we don't ever have to do that because our processes are pretty tight now, but in previous jobs. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. You've been a really good audience. Thanks for listening.